It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Good day and welcome to the program. It is County-Wide. Brad Miller with you. I want to tell you right off the top, we're doing a two-part program. The first will air today, this one. The second comes up on Thursday as we record today with our guests. Police Chief of the City of Cottonwood, Jody Fanning, is here. Chief, good to have you here.
Good morning. How are you
Welcome
today?
you into our studio today. Tim Carter is the Yavapai County School Superintendent. Tim, hello.
Good morning.
Thanks again for helping us cobble this one together. It's an important one, and that's why a two-parter. We're going to talk about school safety. Boy, since mid-December, I don't think anybody needs to know that there are a lot of issues and a lot of debate happening about school safety. The Connecticut shootings really got the debate going again. A lot of that has had to do with guns. We'll talk a little about that today. But the broader issue, and the reason our gentlemen, our guests have assembled with us today, is school safety, something that is on these fellows' minds all the time. And we're going to talk to them a little bit today about Yavapai County, but perhaps even this issue more broadly. What can be done, what is being done, what the real school safety dilemma is, what the issues are, and how to keep kids safe. So, guys, again, I appreciate you coming in and sharing your time. Tim, I've got kind of a silly question off the bat, but it seems kind of silly, but why do we need students to feel safe in school? The reasons are obvious that they need to be, but I want to touch on just the idea of it being very conducive to learning. They need to feel secure. Isn't that why this is so important?
Absolutely. You've answered the question. I mean, it is a place of instruction, and students and staff and parents and the community should feel absolutely comfortable that kids are there and producing good work and that they are safe. There just shouldn't be any doubt about it.
We think about these terrible stories that we've seen too many of recently with intruders and the terrible havoc they can wreak. But just, Chief, just being safe on campus from other students, from other perils, other dangers and things like that. Already in the community, you've done, you and your department have done a number of things, little things sometimes, to help with that, to help students and staff feel safe on campus. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, right after the December incident, we put police officers on the campuses in the mornings and the afternoons every day for the last week before the break. And then we've just continued to, in the mornings, periodically send officers to different schools. During the day, put officers at different schools. And then we've asked the officers to use their lunch breaks, their report writing time and stuff like that, just to park on the schools. Again, just as Tim said, we just want the kids to have that sense of security, that sense of safety. That
it just is not as easy as you might think to either walk on or to try to get away with something,
exactly.
even if it's not at that far end of the scale where terrible things happen, but just mischief and things like that. Since mid-December, there's been a couple incidents in Yavapai County. Rimrock High had a kind of a confused young man come on campus. Baghdad had a student who made some pretty specific threats. I bring those up, Tim, to illustrate that law enforcement, well, let's start with the schools. It seems like from all the reports we've heard, administration and then law enforcement acted exactly right on the money in handling both those situations. Would you agree?
Well, absolutely. That's my understanding as well. And I met with the sheriff last week, and we debriefed both of those situations. And it's interesting. I think that people need to really understand that this is not a new partnership. Law enforcement and schools have been working together in this vein for as long as I've been in the business, which is 40 years. I think it brings some new focus to it, and it brings some new dimensions to it that we need to be careful of. But the concept that schools have an emergency management plan and that they're aware of it and they practice it, they study it, they continuously review it, and they're interacting with their local law enforcement folks about scenarios and how would we deal with those scenarios. I think that's pretty routine on virtually every campus we have in the county.
What is the temperature of folks when you go and visit the schools? And this can be a question, Chief, for you as well as you talk with folks in Cottonwood about school safety, when you talk with principals, kind of teachers and administration staff. What are you getting?
Well, there's no doubt there's an increased sense of awareness and sensitivity to it.
Fear?
I don't think it's fear.
Yeah.
I don't sense that at all. I just think that as educators, we get very busy in the day-to-day activity of educating kids. I mean, that's what's right in front of us right now, and that's where we need to spend our time and our focus. But there are all of those things out there on the perimeter that we need to be aware of, we need to be conscious of. And these types of activities, when they do indeed happen, raise that awareness without any doubt at all.
Sure. Chief?
And I think the atmosphere I get from the principals that I've spoke to and Mr. Wren and Mr. Foist is that they now understand that this is not just a Phoenix, New York, California issue, that this can happen in small town USA.
Right.
And I think it's a respect for that it could occur. And not a fear,
right.
but it's a understanding that this can occur and we can no longer pretend it won't.
And if I could just echo that, I think that's absolutely correct. You know, people sometimes forget that schools are a mirror image of the communities they serve. And if you've got drugs in your community, you've got drugs in that school.
Right.
If you have potential violence in that community, you have potential violence in that school. It's just the way it is.
Right.
And it's not necessarily something to be fearful of, but it's something to be conscious of and guarding in.
Sure. Is there, it seems like as we talk about school safety, some of the things that have been done, Chief, we mentioned just kind of some smaller things, officers with some more patrols and spending a little bit of time. Cottonwood Oak Creek did some simple things, adding some fencing, closing off holes or problems in fences, locking exterior gate, just little things like that. And do we think that there's being enough done on those kinds of things? Before we talk about putting someone armed in the school, and we'll get to that in our program today, but are we doing all of those things correctly at this point? There's always room for improvement, Tim, you know that, but do you think most of the schools have a good sense of...
Take a stab at that, and I think that one of the things that you're going to find is, at least in the education world and from every conversation I've ever had with law enforcement in the law enforcement world as well, there's not one fix to this issue.
Sure.
We have 100 campuses in Yavapai County, and every single campus has different nuances. There are things that are peculiar about that particular campus. And we are going to be hosting with the sheriff and with our local jurisdictions 3 different trainings for administrative staff and security personnel over the next month. And basically the theme is we need to individualize security on every single campus. Clarkdale is different than Beaver Creek. Camp Verde is different than Mingus Union. It's just the way it is. So a team of administrators, law enforcement, really need to walk that campus, look at it on a very specific basis. What are we doing really well, and where are areas where we may have gaps that we might need to address?
Right.
Whether it's fencing, whether it is routing patterns of how people enter and exit the school, whether it's transportation issues, outside security issues, whatever it might be.
Sure.
Lighting, the ability to lock doors from inside and outside, card lock systems. I mean, whatever it might be. Is that school as safe as they can possibly be? And then how do we get the resources there to make those things happen? Something as simple as the principal being able to immediately go and give the chief or whoever the responding officer is, here is a set of physical plans for our building. Here's where the electrical is and the HVAC and all of those things. Something that simple can be critically important when you've got an intruder on that campus and you're trying to isolate a situation.
Right. Prep work ahead of time.
Absolutely.
Chief, that's been done. I know at Mingus, your fellows have been there.
We've been there. We recently I toured the campus, the Cottonwood Oak Creek's campuses at elementary and middle school with Barbara and the principals and the fire chief, and we did exactly that. We identified weaknesses and issues that we see. Holes in the fences. That's where a lot of that came from.
Sure.
And it was really eye-opening for both them and us to walk around and see all the gaps that we have in the protection of our kids.
Right.
And I understand where the schools are coming from. It's been a public place for people to come walk around the tracks and everything else at the middle school, which is outstanding and nice to do. But the school has now come to the conclusion that we can no longer afford that luxury for our public, and that's why they've had to go ahead and close their campus down, which they have now done at the last school board meeting, is to close their campus to civilians coming onto the campus and intermingling with the kids. We can no longer do that stuff.
Sure. It's
and
going to take.
Mr. Foyce has done a great job of securing that campus, making it very focal to where there's only a few locations without climbing over a 6-foot fence that you can access the campus.
And I think, Tim, that's what you meant when you say little things. It's going to be, part of it's going to be not just making it so no one can ever get over this fence, it's going to become a less attractive target. Essentially. I hate to even have to use the word target.
And then the other issue is once you've identified the gap, so to speak, then the issue is what options do we have and how quickly can we find a resolution? Because there are some options that you'll solve this problem, but you'll create another problem in its place. And so we have to be very strategic in how we approach that.
Strike a balance.
And that's why having all of those players at the table when that's being discussed is extremely important.
We need to take a short break, so we'll do this. It's a two-part program. There's plenty more to come. Tim Carter, Jody Fanning, Police Chief Cottonwood. Tim is the Superintendent of Schools for Yavapai County. A short break. We're back after this.
Having a fire escape plan is very important to keep your family safe and together in the event of a fire. When you awake to the sound of a smoke detector and smoke in your room, don't stand straight up. Carefully roll off your bed and stay low under the smoke. If your door is shut, feel the door with the back of your hand. Slowly open the door if no heat is felt. Always stay low until you get to the outside of your home. Always have 2 ways out of your house and a specified meeting place somewhere outside your home. Home escape plans should be drawn up and rehearsed on a regular basis. This could be the difference between life and death if caught in a fire.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
So, I got this new family, and I don't know what it is about this one, but she can't seem to put down that toy all day long. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, and she even talks to it. She talks to that more than she talks to him. What's up, bro? Nice shirt. Who's she talking to? Her mom? She talks to her mom a lot.
Again, welcome back to the program. It's Countywide. Brad Miller with you and our guest today, Jody Fanning, Chief of Police Cottonwood, and Tim Carter, Yavapai County School Superintendent. This is the first part of a two-part program. The other piece will air on Thursday. Just a continuing discussion. There's a lot to say. We wanted to do two parts so the gentleman would have plenty of time to discuss in some detail this issue of school safety. Tim, I want to back up a little bit to something you mentioned about individualizing, and that certainly seems like the way to go. Every place is different. Every campus is different. How much, we're going to get into cost issues somewhere along this path. How much of kind of looking at those things is going to be incumbent upon the school district, whether that's the board or staff, the county, your office, law enforcement? How do you know how that'll roll out?
Well, it really is going to depend on what the issues are and how many items are necessary on a particular campus. We know that it's going to have to be on a case-by-case situation because the funding is going to be critically important, and to be quite honest, there's not going to be enough funding. It's just that simple.
Sure.
There are certain things that the governor and the state legislature are talking about, but it certainly is not going to be a sufficient amount to bring every school up to what that team might think is absolutely the best thing in that campus. So there will be some state funding, we believe. Some of that will be in personnel. Certainly there's been discussions about school resource officers and those kind of things. But probably a significant portion of that is going to fall back on that particular community and that school district. How do we try to fund these things? And to be quite honest, where do they fit in a list of priorities with everything else that districts have to fund?
Right.
Where our office can be very, very helpful is that we have a grant writer, and if we can identify things that are common in particular districts, we could potentially go out and try to find grant funding that would help fund that. The problem is those are going to be very competitive. Everybody and their brothers out there looking for those same kinds of dollars.
Right.
There may be some public-private partnerships, and we've already got a couple of school districts that are saying this is so important, we want to talk to our community about coming up with bond funding.
Do you see a time where school boards, as part of their annual review, along with textbooks and school maintenance and all of those salary expenses and so on, securities become a bigger bubble in that?
Well, I believe so. We already have a state statute, of course, that requires every district to have a school safety plan.
Sure.
And it includes in that a governance piece and a funding piece. The issue, of course, is that it is part of a larger need for funding. And so governing boards have to determine how that pie is going to be sliced. And I would think we're going to start seeing more dollars set aside for school safety issues. But when you do that, then something else within that school district is not going to be funded.
Sure.
So I think we're simply looking at all alternatives, and the more of those things that we can do cooperatively, probably the better.
The alternative that has gotten a lot of play in the media recently, of course, is armed threats on campus. Those are the most devastating, and those are the ones that are in the news the most, certainly. And because of that, as we said at the top of the show, guns have become, guns in schools have been sharing sentences now for quite a while. Our State Attorney General, Tom Horne, has suggested an armed administrator on campus. We did a poll through Yavapai Broadcasting where that was not popular at all. What was very popular, at about a 70 to 20% ratio, was several people on campus armed, be they students, janitor, not students.
Yeah, we don't want to go there.
Not students, but staffers, whether it's a principal, a janitor, what have you. Chief, let's start with that. Guns on campus.
I still personally think that that's a bad idea in the aspect that the people that are on that campus are there for a specific reason, and that's to teach our children and to try to task them to maintain, protect, carry a weapon. That there's a lot to that. Mm-hmm. The training that we get for weapon retention, the training that we get for making sure that our background is what's beyond our target is safe, that we don't shoot through somebody and hit somebody else. These are all things that it takes a lot of time and a lot of training. I know that we have some teachers at Mingus that are former law enforcement and stuff like that. But now, do you want your children sitting in a classroom with a teacher with a gun strapped on their hip at the front of the classroom? Well, the other alternative is to put it in a locked drawer. Well, now then when things blow up, right, how fast can he get to the keys, or can he find the keys, or right, she find the keys and somebody hasn't stolen the keys? How long has the gun been in the drawer? Is it even functioning? There's all these obstacles. So I see it as an issue. The last issue that I see is when my uniformed officers arrive and they see Teacher X walking down the hallway with a gun, we're not going to obviously
know who it is?
We're not obviously just going to shoot Teacher X, but we now have to deal with Teacher X, which is going to take my officers' time. They're going to have to contain, because we can't just bypass them and say, okay, that's a teacher. Right. We've got to take them, we've got to detain them, we've got to take their weapons, so I'm going to lose officers to that event while we're trying to deal with the whole situation. So I still think there's other options rather than arming teachers and administrators. And again, as Mr. Carter pointed out, the first thing that's going to happen is that those will be the targeted people.
Yeah, youngsters they find out everything, and it seems like that is something they'll find out. But Tim, let me ask you same question.
Well, I agree with Chief Hanning in many regards. I think that the way I would hope that the conversation would go is maybe a little bit more conceptually to begin with. I think most people agree that if you have an armed threat on that campus, the only way to end that threat is with someone else who's armed.
Right.
So educators in general, I think, would completely agree with his thoughts, is that that's not my primary job. My job is to be here and safeguard kids, protect kids, but educate kids. My focus is not necessarily on stopping an intruder, even though it may become part of my job just out of necessity. So there's a great deal of debate about that. The second issue is, do we really want our schools to be armed camps? Is that what we want for our kids in the Verde Valley and Yavapai County and America? And I certainly hope not. Right. But maybe that is the direction that we will go. The third issue is, as you know, I'm a local control advocate. In fact, I think most of us are. I would want that local governing board to be able to have the final say of, we're going to have arms on the campus, and if so, under what circumstances, obviously keeping in mind what the state legislature has adopted as a statute. But I would certainly hope the state legislature would not try to force their will on local jurisdictions.
Tom Horn's suggestion.
Well, and I believe from my understanding of Attorney General Horn's proposal is that it would be optional. But I certainly would want to see that local control piece, because I think that's critically important. Because again, what's going to work in one area may not work politically in another area at all. If we decide that we're going to go to armed folks on campus, I think most of our school folks would think that school resource officers are the way to go. The problem is going to be cost. We have 100 campuses in Yavapai County. We have about 10 of those who currently we have funding for, either where the district is paying or through a grant or some type of means of paying for those officers. Right. About 10. So we have 90 campuses. Well, let's just do the math. If $50,000, and I don't know what an officer is going to cost, but let's just, for round figures,
it's just not
$50,000.
Tim, I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt you because we've got to take a break. But your point is well understood, and that's what we talked about earlier, that the cost is going to become a huge, huge piece of this. Everything's going to be dependent on it. We do need to take another short break. We'll come back. It's the first of our two parts with our guests on this issue. We'll be back to Countywide right after this.
Hello, everybody. I am Lou Ann Patterson. My family and I would like to welcome you to the Copper Star Indoor Shooting Range, Northern Arizona's premier shooting sports facility. We offer a 25-yard pistol range, a 50-yard archery range, and Arizona's only 100-yard indoor rifle range. In addition, we have a full-line gun shop as well as an archery pro shop. Come check us out. We're located at Highway 260 and Cherry Road, right next to Out of Africa. Looking forward to seeing you all.
I got no pulse, so losing.
Charging. He's in V-Fit.
Shocking. Joe's at road all the time. Just had a few drinks. This can't be happening.
Are we clear?
Clear. We're just buzzed. Just buzzed. You didn't tell us that, sir. You're right. This isn't happening. He'll be fine. I feel good.
Really?
No, not really.
Buzz driving.
Clear.
Maybe we should stop acting like it's no big deal.
Shocking.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Fire can happen at any time. What would you try to save?
My family photos.
My grandfather's war memorabilia.
My dogs.
I'm firefighter Brandon Wacker with the Cottonwood Fire Department. A working smoke detector is your best defense in the event of a fire. Make sure you have a smoke detector in every room except your kitchen. Test them monthly and change the battery once a year. Take the time to save the things you can't replace.
Welcome back to the program. Again, wrapping it up. I've got a lot more questions. We are doing a second part, so we'll kind of wrap up here today. Tim, I had to cut you off in the middle there. I'm going to be about a minute to kind of conclude that. But yeah, we've got to kind of give and take a little bit on all this.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Anyway, the bottom line in Yavapai County is between $4 and $4.5 million just in Yavapai County.
Okay.
And we're a relatively small county from the standpoint of population, so you can see what the cost would be statewide. And to be quite honest, I think you could have a very good discussion about, do we really need officers on all of those campuses? Maybe we do. the debate will go on, I guess.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more to talk about. We'll continue to talk. This debate, as Tim said, this conversation is going to continue with law enforcement, police, and the community at large. Schools across the country are facing these issues. We're not alone on that. We'll talk more with our guests. Again, wrapping up part one of a two-part program on school safety. We're talking about guns on campus. We'll continue with that part of the discussion when we come back on our next program. Our guests again, Jody Fanning, Cottonwood Chief of Police, Superintendent of Schools for Yavapai County, Tim Carter. It's countywide. We'll see you next time.
This has been Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday as we tackle the hot topics and talk to the decision makers across Yavapai County. That's Countywide with Brad Miller and Paul David each Tuesday and Thursday on this Yavapai Broadcasting station.